Hi, I'm Regan Robinson, your host of Future Fit, the only podcast unraveling the secrets of how the world's most innovative leaders stay future ready in a fast-paced world. I've spent over 20 years as a futurist and strategist, transforming top global brands and putting investment-backed startups on paths to sustainable growth. Along the way, I've become obsessed with new ways to prepare for the future, because thinking about the long term once a year simply isn't enough. In each episode, I talk with movers, shakers, and path breakers who share their stories about how they turn uncertainty into their strategic advantage. Throughout our journey, we'll discover unconventional and imaginative ways to help you thrive today while leading your teams into tomorrow. Future Fit leaders know that being prepared for what's next is more than a business decision. It's a way of being. Let's venture together as we co-create a new future readiness playbook. The future can't wait, and neither can I. So, are you ready to get future fit? Welcome to this spotlight episode of Future Fit, where my special co-host Lori Mazan and I dive into how the most innovative talent executives are reimagining leader development to future-ready their teams and cultures. Lori is the president and co-founder of Sounding Board, a trailblazer in leader transformation, offering high-impact coaching, mentoring software, and strategic program design for top-tier clients like Chime, Zoom, and the Wellstar Health System. I've had the pleasure of hosting Lori previously on my show, and so I'm excited to bring her perspectives and expertise to this vital conversation. And today we're thrilled to have Claude Silver join us. Claude believes that showing up with heart and humanity is the key to unlocking greatness in people, and she's the world's first Chief Heart Officer at VaynerX. VaynerX is a family of creative and media companies with 13 offices globally that builds brands for the now, and they've worked with the likes of PepsiCo, Diageo, Bose, and many more. With Claude as the Chief Heart Officer, Vayner has grown to a global team of 2,000, and she's helped lead Vayner Media to be named the Breakthrough Media Agency of 2022 by Adweek. Claude has also received the Campaign US's Female Frontier Award and Adweek's Changing the Game Award. And she's been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Fast Company, and many, many more. Welcome to Future Fit, Claude.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here, Regan and Laura. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're a celebrity. I didn't realize you were such a celebrity.
It's the title.
Hey, Laura, you've written a book, so come on.
Yeah, we're all celebrities, right?
That's right.
And I have a show. So
it's all whatever we look at in the mirror, and you want to look at something positive and put some good intent and manifestation out there. So you got it.
I love that.
For sure.
So let's dive in, Claude, with the signature question we pose to all of our guests, which is, what does future ready mean to you?
It's such a great question right now as we are on the precipice of AI. And I think if I think about what AI, I believe, is going to bring to us, especially when it comes to the people world, I'm very, very hopeful. So yes, I believe we need to future ready our courage, our vulnerability, our empathy, our compassion, our kindness. I think that if we could create a revolution of tenderness in this world, that would get us halfway there. And then I really think there is the technology, and there are the business and commerce that needs to also follow suit. I'm not saying that they need to all of a sudden become empaths and whatnot, but I think there is a convergence that's really going to happen that is based on mutual respect of each side of the coin. So the people skills and then the commerce. And I believe AI is really going to help bridge that gap there. And it's got to be based on respect and generosity and all of, communication, and not feeling like you have to mark your territory. That's what I'd really like to see. Rather than companies, conglomerates marking their territory, I would rather, my hope is that we get to a place where there's more connective tissue here and, quite frankly, more fulfillment.
Yeah. I love that point of view on AI, which is like, it can actually be part of the connective tissue by giving people more opportunities. And I heard something recently about how AI is going to allow everybody to be a creative. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective that over time, some of those skills that maybe aren't as highly valued in society right now will actually become the skills of the human part of this human plus technology equation.
Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
And actually, Volvo was the first company to put out an total AI generated ad. So it's happening. It's really
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
I sit in the creative industry all day, so I hear about that. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be amazing to see how this unfolds in 10, 20 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, what's coming up for me, Claude, in terms of what you shared is there, I believe to thrive in the future, which is actually now, by the way, it requires an ambidextrous capability and an ambidextrous way of being. And that means a lot of things. But, at the highest level, it's really the ability to harmonize. I try not to use the word balance because that actually means something different. To harmonize between these different types of capabilities and capacities. You listed compassion, empathy, but yet, there's still analytical nature, that technology brings. There's processes and organization and productivity. Like the companies and the leaders that are going to succeed today and into the future are those who figure out how to harmonize between those two areas and embrace both sides of the coin, if you will, and recognize that together they can be a strategic advantage.
Yeah, I wrote down the word harmonize. I think that is so perfect. And what I was thinking was the fluidity and the adaptability. We've all been talking about the growth mindset for some time.
Yeah.
Carol Dweck put it out there, and we've been talking about
Hmm.
it. And it is really a competency that is learned. You can learn that. And if one learns that, if a corporation learns that, then they are more open to harmonizing rather than just playing their flute or their tuba. The whole entire orchestra can come in. And that's what we need. When I said my dream is that we create a revolution of tenderness, I'm not joking. I really want that. And it will take a lot of us breathing and being open to the possibility of whatever that is going to bring. But you're so
Hmm.
right. The future is now. I mean,
Hmm.
that sentence you just said is gone. Done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like you're using the word tenderness. I actually like to use the word love, and I think that people don't use that in the workplace very much. But my first coaching business was actually called Seventh Wave Coaching from the Sting song Love is the Seventh Wave. And
Oh,
yeah, the reason I had that is because I felt like for people to really reach their potential, they need a giant dose and push of love.
hmm.
And, falling in love with my clients, like really just gave them that kind of platform to jump off of. And so I think, I'm not sure if you see love and tenderness a little bit different or not, but I think they might be going hand in hand.
I see love as everything and tenderness, even in respect, even adaptability, all of these things ladder into love. I'm not talking about romantic love, and nor are you.
No.
Also, the spiritual love. When I sit with people, when I'm listening to them and listening to what's going on in their day to day, or maybe why they aren't functioning at such a high level because someone's in the hospital, whatnot. That's spiritual to me. They're sharing
Yeah.
something. I'm a passenger with them in their
Hmm.
car. I don't have to have the answers, but if I can greet them, create and hold space in a non-judgmental way, that's
Hmm.
love. That's love.
Hmm.
100%. And if you think about like people fall in love with their jobs, they fall in love with their workplace, their colleagues, like right away you can imagine how they would be at their most productive. Like we're willing to do anything for love in our outside of work life.
It's so true.
And if we have
Yeah.
love inside the workplace, why wouldn't we operate the same way?
Yeah, I'm going to just take this a little bit longer if you don't mind, because it's such an
Yeah.
important. It's such an
Go
important
for it.
part of just where I sit and where you sit, obviously, which is like we're messy. Human beings are messy, and there's nothing wrong with that. We are
Mm-mm.
messy. We all are. There is no perfection out there. When we give someone attention, or you're giving me attention, I'm giving you attention, it unlocks serotonin, which gives us that wonderful feeling of calm confidence. I can do this. I got this. I might
Mhm.
stutter over my words on this podcast, but I got this, and you're there to catch me. Generosity, which believe is more of an energy of love, unlocks
Mm.
oxytocin. And that is the bonding joy. That
Mhm.
is the feeling of well being. I'm safe with you. That
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
love. That's
Mhm.
love.
Yeah, and imagine in the workplace if people felt safe, they'd be willing to innovate and take a risk and try something new and be creative. So 100%, I saw something you wrote and you used the language, the dirty work of being human. And I
Yeah.
love that term because I do think being a human's super messy, and we get a lot of images out there about not being messy and being all together and looking perfect and having our styled clothing or whatever it is, our Instagram, look. But really, the actual work is not always that pretty, but it's so deep and rich and productive and helpful that it's really worth doing.
Amen.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Claude perfectionism, and I think a lot, perfectionism and resilience, they're in tension with each other, and they actually represent fundamental
Mm,
approaches to challenges, setbacks, and growth. And where I'm concentrated is perfectionism is at odds with future readiness because being future fit is about experimentation, growing through failure,
mm,
embracing challenges before avoiding risk. And so all of these themes that we're talking about are I always talk in recipes, are very much a part of the future readiness recipe because in order, to kind of do this work, it actually is like baking a cake, right? It requires a lot of different things. And sometimes you may need a little more sugar for that particular cake, or you may need a different ingredient. Like it's not going to be the same cake every time. I hate to tell everybody. Sorry.
Right. Get used to those taste buds, firing on all cylinders. But that's the beauty of it. And again, there is no utopia. I just want to like double down on what you said about perfectionism. You're right. With perfectionism, it has to be perfect, subjectively perfect.
Mm-hmm.
My perfection is very different than your perfection.
Mm-hmm.
right.
So none of us are going to be right, you know? And
Yeah.
going to the creative space in which I work in and I have worked in for years and years and years, there is no perfection. It's creativity based on whatever we need to create for that brand or that image or that person. And it is all going to look very different based on who is reviewing the creative, also.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think it turns out to be very disappointing for people, which
Mm.
is like they have their own sort of measuring stick they're measuring against. And then when someone outside of them doesn't have the same measuring stick, it's very disconcerting.
It is. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you wrap your ego up in what you've presented, the cake that
Yeah.
you've presented. You have pride in that cake, don't you?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
how we enter into that conversation by saying, I think it needs a little more sugar, or hey, that's too much baking powder, that's where the tenderness and the kindness and the love come into play. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
criticism. We're not criticizing here. We're connecting with you. We want to be, what I always
Mm-hmm.
say about
Mm-hmm.
feedback, feedback isn't to criticize you or call something out. It is to connect with you, and then we
Yeah.
can solve something.
Yeah.
Right. It's actually to have a conversation, right? The thing about perfectionism, if you think it's perfect, then you're done. So that means there's no more creativity, innovation, development, something. It's a complete package. And
Yeah.
so you actually are stalled at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need
So
a new
true.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, you mentioned something earlier that I would love to dig into, which was untapped human potential. because untapped human potential, leader development, and future readiness are actually very deeply entwined, especially when it comes to navigating and thriving in a world that is in flux. And from my perspective, unrealized potential is actually the fuel for innovation and resilience. Leader development equips people to access and harness that potential. And then future readiness is really the outcome of aligning both to create a cycle of business and human capital growth. So you have this flywheel effect going. Now, Claude, you shared the provocation. I love what if questions. It was, what if leaders truly recognize the humanity and potential in every team member? So how are you developing your team members in a way that centers on their humanity and untapped potential? And how could this mindset shift the culture of future readiness in your company?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that question, because we spent almost 2 years creating what we call core competencies for every single department and every single role. And the core competencies are split into two. The first one is foundational. That is your behaviors, what we expect of you at this role, at this role, at this role. And they are leadership, communication, accountability, and growth mindset. So that is what we expect. We will pour that into you with training and development, osmosis, all of that. And the functional is your skill. The skill, which we know skills are commoditized, right? It's all about relationships. It's all about connection and communication. And we need skill because we want to be the best of the best. So I think it's really that kind of that dovetailing of the core competencies, which is these are the behaviors we expect you to have and we expect you to evolve into. You're not going to be alone. We have your career journey in front of us. We know what it is you want to be when you grow up, all of that stuff. And we also expect you to be knocking it out of the park or performing at least a steady level, if not high, in your skill set. And so we're very high touch company. And I think that's part of the win. So I've never done HR before. I had never done HR when I took this role on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I studied to be a psychotherapist, really wanted to do that. And then it was 1998. I was in San Francisco, right place, right time, the first internet.com boom. And I got a job in digital and I never looked back. And I've been lucky. My personality and who I am, I lead a lot of teams. I like people. What can I say? I like potential. I really, really do. It makes me happy. So I decided.
Oh, sorry. Go, Claude. We're like kindred spirits because I also got trained as a therapist and hated it and never did it and moved off into other things as well.
Well, no wonder you're a great coach. No wonder. No wonder. You have to have that desire to sit with people. You have to have.
Yeah.
It's not even patience. It's a desire and also the humility to sit with another human, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, because I like this way that, like, you weren't ever in HR, and yet your approach is actually a very cutting edge approach. We talk about like horizontal and vertical development. Horizontal being more like this foundational skills, and then the vertical being more the behaviors and internal development that's needed to adjust to all the changing context. And you're not using that language, and maybe you never even heard of that before, and yet you're doing that. So I love when intuition and sort of data research kind of comes together and makes both sides true.
Yeah, I really think it's common sense, and I understand that common sense is not common for everyone, and that's cool. I have a job. But when
I actually just read there's no such thing as common sense. I will send you the research that's been done. It's fascinating.
I would like to see it because I was like, what is common sense anyway? It's common to me.
Research is saying it doesn't exist. It's really
So when Gary and I, my boss, Gary Vaynerchuk, and I created this role 8.5 years ago, a couple things. One, I asked him, what are we doing here? I had already been at the company for 16 months. I was already one of the oldest people there. I had a good idea. And he said, we are creating the single greatest human organization in the history of time. And I was like, sign me up. That is aspirational.
Wow, that's visionary.
And then I said, how do we know if I'm successful? There's no job description here. This is my job description. You will touch every single human being and infuse the agency with empathy. Again, sign me up.
Hmm.
That's going to take a lot of heart. It's going to take a lot of scaling, and it's going to take a lot of belief, right? And
Mhm.
then the last thing I said is, I didn't do HR. I don't want to do HR. And so he said, you'll hire a great team around you. And I have, which is great. I changed the name of the department to People and Experience because that's what it means to me. We are taking care of you from the moment you put in your CV, your entire life cycle here. And then even we're going to help you find a job if it doesn't work out here. We have an alumni program. So people and experience that's the business I'm in. And
Hmm.
it feels, I know it feels revolutionary and avant-garde, but when we break it down, Lori, to love, to
Yeah.
it's not. It's what we do all day. We learn, yeah, empathy is the emotion, right? Empathy is an emotion. The action, empathy in action, is kindness and compassion and care,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
you learn at 2, 3, 4 years old. We can do
Right.
that. We know how to do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
We might
Hmm.
have forgotten, but we know how to do that.
Yeah.
I was thinking in a way it's a little bit of a throwback because I think I'm a little bit older than you. And when I started my career, people stayed at the same company for basically their entire career. And those companies really did take care of those individuals,
Yeah.
and those individuals felt taken care of. And then in kind of the 90s, 2000s, we decided everyone should be responsible for their own career. And the industry changed, and we no longer took care of people, and you're kind of on your own. So I think everything sort of cycles, and I love that we're coming back to that kind of core value that people are the core of business and we have to take care of them. And yes, it's going to look very different than 1980, but the concept is similar.
Yeah. Well, and before we transition to the topic of empathy, because I'd love to dig in there, what I think is interesting about all three of us here is we are actually all three in the business of change and transformation. And while you two have actually studied psychology and human behavior, and I am actually like a neuroscientist in training. Like it's like my side job. I study cognitive science, neuroscience. On top of that, I actually have taken what I've learned in 7 years of executive coaching and psychotherapy and infused that into my future ready cake that I have baked. Because a lot of the work I do, and that's actually where I start with people, is before people can be open to the possibilities and start envisioning what could be the future of your company, there's a lot of mental work we have to do. There's a lot of imagination exercising that we have to do before you can actually do this work really effectively and efficiently. Assumptions, cognitive biases, all of these things, fear, ego, all,
Yeah.
Oh
all
my
of it comes
gosh.
into play.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that all three of us, while I did not study it like you both did, we've all infused this into our work, which I think is pretty incredible.
I love that. Three, and I mean, you were strangers to me with the, until the last 40 minutes. I
Yes.
didn't know you,
Right.
and I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
Likewise, likewise. Well, speaking of empathy, so empathy builds the foundations for leaders and teams to really understand and address the human aspects of change, which is really critical for building trust during uncertain times. And capacity building that focuses on empathy fosters leaders who are better equipped to inspire, collaborate, and innovate, which in turn prepares companies to meet the challenges of the future. Now, Claudia, your heart approach, which stands for have empathy, earn trust, act as a Sherpa, reach everyone, and take down toxicity, that feels like a really powerful framework for unlocking leader potential. But let's hone in on the E part of the equation. So, how are you embedding empathy into your leader development efforts at VaynerX? And in what ways does it equip your people to navigate the challenges of the future?
Yep, it's a wonderful question, and it's multifaceted. I can come at it first with psychological safety. which we know has become a buzzword, but is extremely important. Google's Project Aristotle told us that in 2015, that psychological safety is the number one thing that a team needs to be high performing, high functioning. So you have to teach psychological safety. That's one arena that we can start in, that we do. So we have a lot of talks on that. How do you create and hold space for another human being? How do you move your ego into the back seat and know that it is not about you, my friends? It is about whatever this is in front of us, not having to have the answers, but to work with them, finding out, what is it that makes them feel safe? What brings them belonging? What brings them that connection? And what doesn't, right? I happen to feel very safe in the workplace. I'm very lucky and I'm very entitled. I understand that. I'm not Black, I'm not Asian, I'm me. And so I already walk into the office with a little bit of a different grounding, let's just say. And I just want to say that because it's really, really important.
Right.
And we're also teaching what is belonging and why does belonging matter so much? Like, what does it really mean? And it goes back to what I was talking about in terms of the oxytocin, in terms of the bonding. And you have to, I believe a successful team must have the psychological safety, must have a shared purpose for sure, and be able to connect and communicate with one another, even through the hard times. Yeah. So that means figuring out how I'm going to give you feedback. How am I going to receive the feedback that you give me? I am going to assume that you have good intent. And that is something that my goodness, we go through over and over and over in our workplace. Now, there's nothing on our walls that says empathy rocks, kindness rules, right? I could never do that because we all know it has to become a habit. We have to use it. We have to act on it. And then it becomes secondhand, right? I know I can always count on myself to be empathetic because I've been that way forever. I can't count on myself to be a mathematician, right? So just, those things. But having, we do a lot of role playing in our training, whether or not that's feedback, whether or not that's presentation skills, whether or not that's learning how to critique piece of a creative, which we just talked about. So the E, you cannot understate the E. And I always go back to kindness and compassion because we can do that. When people say, hey, Claude, I can't put your shoe on my foot. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be me. I want you to be able to ride shotgun with me and tell me it's going to be okay. Put your hand on my shoulder and say, I got you.
And certainly, don't be me. That would go against all this. No, we want you to be you. But we also want you to have access to some of these qualities and abilities and skills.
Yeah. However Bill wants to show that, however Sally wants to embody that, that's up to them. And, there's a common denominator. When someone is kind and when they're not kind. So it's kind of black and white when it comes down to, are we teaching empathy and is it working? And I have to look at our retention numbers of this last year and say, wow, I think something's working here.
Something's working. So people are saying, well, there you go. You're going to get a lot of people's attention by talking about retention. Because we haven't used the word trust, but to me, everything you're saying just leads to a sense of trust among team members or among employees or among bosses, and colleagues and whatever. And that I think it's that trust that I don't know if it's maybe the result of these things or something, but I think that trust is a key part of this whole equation.
Yeah, I actually think it is. I think it is an output of it.
Because, an output. Okay.
We know we're creating the psychological safety that has to happen. We have to create belonging in the workplace. We have to do our best so that we can, with open arms, adapt all of the different people that walk in our doors because we need everyone. It's a minestrone soup. We need everyone, right?
Yeah. The cooking analogies. Yeah.
And I think if we do those two things right, with a couple other great things, shared purpose, I think is very important. Communication, vulnerability. The output is trust. I do believe that. That doesn't mean
Hmm.
that's not one and done. This is
Yeah. It's
consistent.
more continuous. Yeah, more continuous. So,
Yeah.
Sounding Board is really a coaching and mentoring organization. Like you mentioned role playing. What do you think about coaching or mentoring as tools for developing some of this?
A, 1,000%. We've got a mentorship program called the Championship Program. And
Mm,
we started it where it was women could mentor anyone, male, female, and the men could mentor female. But we wanted to make it so that we wanted to give a lot of kudos to the strong female voices that we have in the workplace. And so right now I'm championing someone in Asia, I'm championing someone in our Amsterdam office and in our LA office. And the list goes on and on and on. And so it's fascinating because these champions, we do put them through somewhat of an education in terms of coaching so that they know at least 5 things to ask when the person is in front of them.
right.
But then it's really, you go for it, take it on the road. What is your desire here? This person might want to learn how to speak to their boss or get a promotion, and I might be working with someone much more on their life skills.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about that, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience of working with coaches, is, empathy starts with self-awareness, right? And coaches or mentors, if they have the right skills, can guide leaders and people through exercises to help them understand their emotional triggers, their biases, and their reactions. And then by increasing self-awareness, you become more attuned to how your actions and your words affect others, which is actually, that's another type of empathy. And the other thing two things that I wanted to share, and this came up in our warm-up chat, is I think it's important for our audience to remember that empathy is it's not about just about feeling good, right? Or walking in someone's shoes. It's actually a tool that can be used for problem solving. Whether that's an HR challenge, a leadership development challenge, a creative and marketing challenge, a future readiness challenge. And the other thing that occurred to me as I was walking in the beautiful sunshine of Manhattan earlier today is that there's this interplay between empathy, leader development, and future readiness that is really interesting and potentially an untapped strategic advantage, because there are actually bottom line benefits from an HR and talent perspective, as well as a company health and growth perspective. Because when you're investing in all three at the same time, so cooking that soup or baking that cake, you actually get more bang for your buck due to the knock-on effects of all of these elements working together in harmony, which I actually think
Yeah.
is really powerful.
Yeah, to your first part about the owning your impact at Sounding Board, that's actually one of our cultural foundations. Is literally we literally call it owning your impact. And you might imagine from a business perspective, if people own their impact, that means that HR or bosses or somebody else doesn't have to own a person's impact. And, it really changes the nature of the structure of the organization.
I'm really glad we're talking about this because we talk a lot about intent and intention. We want to go about our days or go into this meeting thinking that the person that we're speaking to has the best intent and we have the best intent. But we don't talk a lot about the impact. And that's a whole nother ball of
Mm,
wax, to your point, which is it's ownership, it's accountability.
yeah,
It's
it
exactly,
really is.
yeah.
And it has that empathy component in it because you have to be able to see, like, oh, what I just said, it didn't land the way I had hoped. This person's face just now looks shocked. So maybe I need to be like, whoops, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How did you receive that? Yeah, here's really what I meant by that.
Yep.
And even after the fact, like at Sounding Board, sometimes you'll see people will come back a couple day, 2, 3 later and be like, I thought about that. And that wasn't really how I wanted that to go. Can we have a redo here? And it's so lovely. Talk about generating trust. Like even when you have something messy, you have a way to clean that up and continue to develop your relationship.
Right. And if you can foster forgiveness in that,
Yeah.
then you're playing with the full deck.
Yeah.
Mm.
100%.
Well, I think the trust ingredient, is really important, especially when you think about intention. Those two are connected as well, because you have to trust that the trust already has to exist in order for you to believe that other people have good intentions or whoever is
Yeah.
coming to the table. And trust is so
Little
important.
chicken and egg, huh?
Right?
Yeah.
And trust is so important from a future readiness perspective because that is about challenging the status quo or getting outside your comfort zone. Again, all of these things are very germane as well to leader development, right?
Yes.
All these things work together.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
these things. And a lot of times when I'm speaking to folks, I always speak to them as though they are leaders because they're leading their own life. They're the CEO of
Mm.
their own life, or we would hope, right? And
Right.
so I do try to create commonality in a big room of all different types of people rather than you're the leader and you're the junior person.
Mhm.
When I want everyone to feel empowered that, yeah, they decided what to put on today and, what types of shoes.
Oh, yeah. And how to interact with each other. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, sounding board, you were talking about your core competencies. We have a sets of those as well. And we have them split exactly the same way, which is leading yourself, leading your team, leading across the organization. And it starts with leading yourself, right?
Has to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's fascinating. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but when kids go off to college and maybe they haven't had that autonomy,
Yeah.
all kinds of hell breaks loose that first, second, third week, and that those first months of debauchery. It's like, oh my God, I'm
I'm
out. Right?
free.
And then you're like, oh, what just happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Well, is there anything else either one of you would like to add before we bring our conversation to a close?
I think there's this one phrase I've been thinking about today. It's a Buddhist phrase, and it's the mind creates the world. Your mind creates your world. And your mind is going to be different than my mind, and so forth and so on. So, within all of that, we need that respect of understanding that we may be the same age, but we've had very different lived experiences. And that's
Hmm.
cool. And that's
Hmm.
really cool, right? And that's just, back to that respect and that spirit of generosity, I think, is something back to the tenderness that I think I just want to continue to pour into my soup, pour into my batter, whatever it is.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and I think it's like holding reality with a small case R versus a large case R. Like
Mhm.
there's one reality. The truth is that everybody has their own reality. And it leads to that concept about being right in my mind, which is if I think there's only my reality and it's the right way, the only way, then I'm going to have a lot of judgments about everybody else. But if I
Yeah,
realize everyone's lived experience is creating their own reality and they might not think the same way as I do, now you have the opportunity for that meeting of the minds where different points of views generate
yeah.
creativity, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things.
Future,
Mhm.
innovation, all of that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and just like there are many realities, there are many possible futures. And so before I bring us to a close, I think one of the many amazing takeaways I have from our conversation is, and it kind of came up in different language, but everything that we're talking about, future readiness, some of the capacities and the capabilities of, trust and sort of just all these ingredients that we're talking about. It's not a one and done or annual activity that you check off your list. It is a way of being, right?
Yeah.
And what I think the marvelous opportunity for everyone are these are skills, capabilities, and capacities that everyone can cultivate. Everybody needs different help. Everybody needs different solutions. Yes, of course, all of that is true. But I just think that is so powerful what we're talking about are things that everybody has the ability to cultivate and harness in their
Yeah.
personal lives
Yeah.
and their professional lives.
Yeah, we have that one at Sounding Board in our cultural approach as well, which we just call it continually evolving.
Yeah,
So you're never done, right? It's always a work in progress.
always. There's so much to learn.
So much to learn. And with that, Claude, where can people go to find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn and doing a website refresh so you can come back a little later. That's a place. I do stuff on Instagram, but really LinkedIn is where I really love the community out there and get a lot from them and just really want to be of value.
Likewise. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time and your illuminating insights, Claude. It's been enlightening, and Lori and I have had so much fun exploring with you today.
Hey.
Very much enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Fit. If you're listening, you're probably future curious. So follow me in my newsletter on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going and share your discoveries with the Future Fit community. And if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, rate, and review Future Fit on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time.